What is going on, guys? Welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Welcome back to another episode of the Guides Network. We've got a treat in store for you guys today, but first I want to let y'all know something. For all my iPhone users that have been waiting for the Lyfe app, it's available. We have a web app version that you can use on any device, including an iPhone or an Android or tablet of any kind. So check out the web app linked in the description for all devices. We do still have the Android specific app available in Google Play Store as well. And if you're about that fish life, if fishing is life, you might want to get you one of those Fish Life decals that are linked on yourlakeforkguide.com in the description as well. All right, so what is today's topic? Today's topic is one of my favorites. By the way, we're on show 99, guys. The next episode of the Guides Network will be number 100. How awesome is that? And you definitely want to tune in next week because we're going to blow it out. We're going to show you guys some really in-depth stuff, some stuff that guides probably wouldn't normally give up. But we're going to make sure that we go out of the way to celebrate the 100th episode of the Guides Network with a topic and detail that'll be worthy of the 100 episodes that we've done. I firmly feel like we've built the best playlist of videos for you guys to learn from as far as catching more and bigger bass. We've brought numerous different professional fishermen on here. We've dug deep, made them go in depth on all their favorite ways to catch bass. And now we are almost to 100 episodes of the most in-depth, detailed, top secret, given away video material that you can possibly find. All right, enough delaying. Sorry for the long-winded. I'm prone to do that, but it's wintertime. Wintertime is time to catch big bass. So today, let's talk about one of my favorite techniques to do that. Let's talk about fishing an old flipping jig. Okay, let's start this out with my setup for my flipping jig. Now, when I'm fishing a flipping jig in the wintertime, I'm fishing deep creek bends, heavy cover, big fish, so I'll need a lot of heavy equipment. I might not use quite this heavy equipment if I'm flipping shallow bushes or something like that with a jig, but this is a 1/2 ounce or bigger flipping jig in deep water and heavy cover. So we're gonna gear up a little bit, you might say. First thing, I'm gonna have a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel or faster. Honestly, the faster the reel, the better. You don't actually move this bait with your reel handle. You only pick up slack and reel the fish in. So you want that gear ratio as fast as you can get it. The line is going to be 20-pound fluorocarbon every single time, no exceptions. I don't like braid. Most people think, well, braid's strong, sensitive, blah, blah, blah. Here's the deal. We're fishing a lot of old wood in these creek bends. That braid will cut that wood. That noise, and it'll cut a groove in that wood and get you hung up. And that noise that braid makes coming through your rod guides, it makes that same noise when it runs up against a branch or a root system or a stump under the water. And I don't think those fish like that noise. I think it's weird to them. They don't understand it. It kind of freaks them out a little bit. So I always go fluorocarbon when I'm fishing these deep creek bends with a jig. Now, for the rod, this is the most important part. You need a meaty rod. And 6th Sense, their Lux Series rods, they got an outstanding jig rod, in my opinion. The 7.5 extra heavy in the 6th Sense Lux rods is a phenomenal jig rod. It's 7.5 foot, give or take. It's got a lot of meat down here, really strong, powerful rod, and a really pretty stiff tip too, which is what you want. When it's cold outside, that tight, stiff tip is going to help you feel that subtle bite that they tend to do sometimes in the cold water. And on top of that, it's going to not have any give in it when you set the hook. It's going to get that fish up and out of all that thick, nasty cover as fast as possible. And that's exactly what you want. If you're interested in the 6th Sense Lux rods, go over to 6thsensefishing.com, which is linked in the description as well. Be sure when you're checking out, punch in that code, Your Lake Fork Guide, in the promo box on the checkout screen. You'll get a 10% discount on all orders, including rods, apparel, jigs, whatever you need. You're going to get 10% discount. Kind of our way of saying thank you to all of you guys. And we sure appreciate 6th Sense for doing that for us. Now, let's talk about the jig that I'm using itself. And we're going to go a little in depth, a little in detail, like we tend to do around here. The jig I'm using is the 6th Sense hybrid jig, and I'll go into colors here in a minute. But the first thing you need to look at when you're looking at a jig that you want to flip in heavy cover and still hook fish effectively, you got to look at the head design. Now, the general rule of thumb is the more snag-free a jig head is, the worse it hooks fish. And I'll explain that to you right now. A lot of jigs, a lot of flipping jigs will be taller than they are wide. If they're longer this way than they are wide, well, they kind of slide over the junk and they come through the narrow gaps in the branches and the root systems and all that. They slide through there real good. The problem with that is when they're longer this way, when you set the hook, when it's coming out of that fish's mouth, it wants to turn on its side because it's longer that direction, and then you hook them in the corner of the mouth. Now, we're dealing with wintertime fishing, not a lot of bites, big bites in heavy cover. You got to have a good hold with that hook, and you're not going to get a lot of bites. So if you lose one or two in a day, it can completely ruin your day because you're not getting that many bites. Well, you say, Billy, why don't you just use a football jig? A football jig hooks them great. Football jig's way wider than it is tall. It comes out like this every time. Football jigs hook fish phenomenally. Problem is, a football jig ain't real good in a root system down there in all that heavy cover. It gets hung up a lot. So what you got to do is kind of find the best of both worlds. I firmly believe that what 6th Sense has done with their head design on the hybrid jig has done it as good or better than any jig on the market. If you look real close at this shape of this head, it is wider than it is tall, which is important because that's going to keep it coming out vertical. Now, if you look at the angle of that head, that jig's going to come out from this angle to this angle, all in the top of the mouth. I hook fish in the top of the head every time with this jig, just about. I can't hardly ever remember hooking one in the corner on this jig right here. They always get them somewhere in the top part of the mouth, which is exactly what you want. The other thing is, because of those angles and the way they designed this head, it is extremely snag-free and weedless. Like I said, guys, I firmly believe that they have walked the line of weedless versus good hookups as good as anybody ever has in a head design of a jig. That's why I'm very, very, very adamant about a 6th Sense hybrid jig. It's a very good jig in heavy cover, hooks the fish well, weedless, all that good stuff that we just talked about. The other factor is too hook, which there's a lot of. You got to have a big shark gaff hook, which is what they have in this jig right here. Now, there's a lot of jigs on the market that have a really good hook. There's a ton of them. Most of them have a really good hook these days. But 6th Sense covers all the bases, you know, quality skirt, good weed guard. They hit all those cues, but they've got an advantage with that head design. All right, let's talk about colors. Colors, I'm going to be pretty simple on, okay? You know, black and blue is probably the most staple color. Of course, I absolutely use black and blue. I like black and purple, black, blue, and purple. Blurple, as we call it, me and old Ronnie Kelly call it, is a great color. I also like greens and browns, or another color that I'll go to as we get later on in the winter, kind of closer to springtime, kind of full-on pre-spawn, almost getting ready to spawn. That's when I'll really start picking up a lot of those green and brown color jigs. You know, when it's right now in January, I'm pretty much a black and blue, black and purple kind of guy, with one exception. And I'm going to show you guys right now. In the 6th Sense Divine Hybrid Jig, there's a color called Cajun Crawl. And it's black with blue flake. It has chartreuse and orange, just a little bit, chartreuse and orange highlights on the bottom side of it. Now, I'll pluck that chartreuse out of there because there's a little trick. I like to add a little orange to the bottom of my black and blue jigs. This is the one we're fishing today. Caught a hammer on it, got broke off on another one. But I like to add a little orange on the bottom of that jig. So 6th Sense, they make that Cajun Crawl. You can take it, just pull those chartreuse strands out of there, and you have the top secret Lake Fork guide trick jig already ready to go with high quality skirt and all the other great features we've talked about. And those are literally the 4 colors that I'll use, guys. That's it. That's all I use. Now, when it comes to trailers, there's a few different types of trailers. And that's going to depend a lot on water temperature. When the water temperature is really hot, I like to use a flapping crawl type trailer, a rage crawl, if you will, type trailer when the water's extremely warm, you know, upper 50s, 60s, really in the 60s is kind of what I like to use. 60s and up, I like to use a flapping crawl like a rage crawl. I actually use an oversized Rage Menace that I get kind of home poured in a garage. A guy pours it in his garage for me. That's what I prefer to use on my jigs when the water's warm. Now, vast majority of the time in the wintertime when I'm fishing, the water is in the low 60s, down in the 50s, and even down into the 40s, upper 40s. I'm going to use a Smash Crawl by Smash Tech almost exclusively during that time. I'm hardly ever going to pick anything else up. I'm either going to go with the contrast of the black and blue with the electric blue trailer when the water's dirty, or I'm going to go just straight black with blue flake, which I fish a lot as well. And of course, when I go over to the green jig, I'll pick up green pumpkin. Now, when the water gets into the lower half of the 40, say 45, 46 and below, I'll actually go to a chunk style trailer. This is the Strike King KVD Perfect Plastics chunk. That one's good. Zoom makes a good super chunk that works just fine. This is the one I use more times than not, is the old KVD Strike King chunk. But I only use that chunk in very extreme cases. Now, the areas, guys, and we're gonna actually, this is gonna be part of our video next week for the 100th episode. We're gonna really cue you guys up on how to find pre-spawn fish, try to set you guys up for the best February and March that you've ever had. I'm gonna go super in detail, get another guest on here to go in detail with me on different ways that we target pre-spawn fish and kind of how to locate them and how to find them specifically. So today we're not going to go too far in the area. I'll just tell you, we're fishing those creek bends. Tend to fish the outside bends more. They have a steeper drop because before the lake was a lake, when that was a creek, that water pushed up against that outside bend and washed it out. Exposed more of those root systems from the trees that are standing there, and really kind of created a bunch of brush piles on the edge of a ledge with those exposed root systems. And the depth will change. You know, right now we're in January. This creek channel bend that's right there is about 26 feet in the bottom, 26, 27 feet in the bottom. And it actually jumps all the way up to about 16 feet, 15 feet on top. So big hard drop on that, almost 10-foot drop on that. So big ledge on that one. But that's kind of where we are right now. Now, here pretty soon, the next warming trend or two, we'll start shifting back into shallower creek bends and kind of follow them all the way up to 8 to 10 feet in the bottom, 5 to 6 feet on top as we get closer to the spawn. So you just kind of have to find those fish, fish all different depths till you get a couple bites, and then once you've got a couple bites, key in on those depths, and then kind of follow them up with the warming trends and back down with the cooling trends. Those fish will just move back and forth in that creek, stopping on those bends. All right, let's get this thing ready to fish. You guys kind of see the final product right here. I'm gonna show you how it gets there. This jig right here is brand new out of the skirt. The skirt's real long, okay, so you can trim it to whatever length you desire, okay. You know, in the wintertime especially, I like to trim my skirts real short. I like my jig to be very compact. Now in the summertime, I'll let my hair grow a little bit. I'll let that jig skirt stay a little bit longer and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to take and pull my skirt down, kind of gather it up here, okay? And I'm going to pinch it right there at the hook bend. My hook bend is right here. Now I'm going to cut this thing just maybe a 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch right below that hook bend, just like that, as you guys see there. Nice, short, compact skirt. Next thing I'm gonna do is make sure my weed guard's good. Now, 6th Sense is real good on their hybrid jigs about getting that weed guard almost dead even with that barb. What I want is I want this thing to be dead even with this barb when I push it down. Now, as you can see there's just maybe an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch overhang. So I'll trim this weed guard just ever so slightly. And now that weed guard will be just dead even with that barb. Now the reason I like to trim a weed guard, people go, man, won't that make you hang up more? It actually has the opposite effect. The shorter your weed guard gets, the stiffer it gets. So as long as it's still covering your point and your barb, it actually becomes more weedless the shorter you trim it. Okay, now you don't want to trim it down below your point of your hook or below your barb, because then you're letting sharp points exposed with no weed guard to protect them. But like I said, as short as you can get it while still covering the hook point and the barb, that jig's actually going to be more weedless. I like to take and I'll bend it up and kind of fan it out a little bit, spread that weed guard out, give it more coverage, let it cover a little more area of that hook. That way if that jig does roll at all coming through snags and hang-ups, it's got a little more width on that weed guard to kind of cover it as it rolls, sliding through the Y's and the junk down there. All right, now let's get us the trailer ready. On old Blurple jig right here, we'll rig him up with old black and blue flake trailer. So what you want to do is, I like my skirt to kind of match, right? I like my skirt to end right just barely below where my crawls start. So I'm gonna go ahead and line that jig up as such, okay? Figure out where I want that hook point to come out in that trailer, kind of measure that, and then I'm gonna look back here at the top of my jig, just under the, then I'm gonna look back at the top of the jig, just under my skirt band, and I'm gonna pinch that much of it off, okay? All right, now I've got it measured. I've got my trailer trimmed, I got my skirt trimmed, I got my weed guard trimmed. So we're gonna have, once I slide this trailer on here, you guys will see, we're gonna have a really nice, compact profile jig. And that's exactly how I rig my jig and fish it in the wintertime. Nice, short, compact profile. Boy, I tell you. Listen, I got a theory now. If you rig a bait up, get ready to tie it on, if you don't look at it, get a little bit excited inside, you need to get a different bait. When I look at that jig right there, it gets me going. Gets me a little wound up. All right, let's get up here on the front deck, make a cast out this creek bend, show you guys how we're retrieving this bait. It's pretty simple, but we'll go through it anyway. All right, so where I'm positioned right here, I got a creek bend directly out in front of me where I can hit the outside bend from where we're sitting right here. So we're gonna go ahead and make a long cast. This is an important part. I don't want to just pitch this jig out there and let it fall down into the creek bend. I actually want to throw well past the bend of the creek. Now once it's out there, I'm gonna strip a little line, let that bait fall straight to the bottom so that it doesn't pendulum back towards the boat. Okay, so once that jig is all the way on the bottom, I'm just gonna start dragging real slow. Just ease up. Now, sometimes when the wind's blowing like it is across here a little bit, it'll blow a little slack in your line. What you can do, because you're literally just creeping that jig across the bottom, you can actually point your rod down and drag to the side. Okay, and that's gonna help. Like right now, I can already feel some resistance of a tree or a root system or something. So I'm gonna continue to drag. There it is. Okay, just hopped over. So what you do right there, I drug it up to that root system. It kind of caught on a little bit, and then when it popped, I immediately fed it slack so that the bait will fall straight down into the root system. And that's exactly what you want, guys. These fish are hugged up down in those root systems. And so you want that jig to catch that root, fall, and go straight down into their face. And it's actually, you get pretty hard bites doing this. It's actually kind of a reaction bite. They're sitting down there cold in them roots, and that jig goes zipping down in there. And that's why we use a 1/2 ounce or bigger jig. I use a 1/2 ounce almost all the time. Every once in a while, I'll even step up to a 3/4. But we always use a 1/2 ounce or bigger jig. And the reason why is because it's actually kind of a reaction bite. That jig goes zipping down into that root system after you crawled it over it. And man, that fish, he just snaps at it and they hit it pretty hard. That's the other thing too. When you're dragging through here and you get thunk and you feel him hammer down, don't check up, don't see if he's there. As soon as you feel that thump from him lashing out at that jig, go ahead and set the hook. They're not really eating it to eat it, they're kind of eating it out of reaction. So sometimes they don't always hold on to it. You want to go ahead and set that hook quick as you can. Now as you'll see on this fish catch, when you set the hook, you want to set the hook and get them up. Once you get them up, point your rod down, horse them in, flip them in the boat. You got a big rod, you got big line. Unless that fish is 11, 12, 13 pounds, there's no need to play it. You know, even up to 8 or 9 pounder, you can boat flip them. Just make sure you kind of swing them to the side. Don't swing them straight up. You pull your rod straight up when you're boat flipping an 8 pounder, you're gonna break your rod. You'll notice when I do that boat flipping, I'm always swinging to the side. Boy. Yeah, that's a head. Stay down, baby. Get up in here. There we go. Now, do y'all remember what I told y'all about creek bends on Lake Fork in the winter? Listen, I don't lie to y'all. I may BS y'all a little bit, but I'm not gonna lie to you. Look at that big old pre-spawner. Golly, what a stud. That ain't no 10 pounder, but that's a probably bumping 8, probably a 7.5 pound fish. Just a beautiful, awesome Lake Fork bass. That's what Lake Fork's all about, a bunch of these. There's a bunch of these swimming in this old pond, boys. Man. One more look at that big old pig right there. Let's turn her loose. Well, all right, guys, man, the old flipping jig in a creek bed in the wintertime, it's probably caught more double-digit fish than everything else combined. It's just a great thing to learn how to do. I know a lot of people struggle with the jig, don't have confidence in it. I would encourage you to find some creek bends with some good sharp breaks on them. Put that jig in your hand, just don't let go of it. Force yourself to fish it. It'll pay off. You'll catch big fish like the one you saw me catch today. It always catches fish like that every winter, time after time after time out here. So it's well worth the time invested to learn how to get good at this technique. Sure appreciate you guys watching today. Hey, Fish Life app. If you've been looking for it, go get it. It's ready for iPhone via the web app version. We are still working on the iTunes version that'll be available in the iTunes store. But right now, you can go ahead and get it on your iPhones on the web app version. Get over to sixandfishing.com, punch in that code, Your Lake Fork Guide, get that 10% discount. Go check us out at yourlakeforkguide.com for all your fish life gear. And be sure to stay tuned next week for the special 100th episode of the Guides Network. Can't explain to you guys how awesome it is for me that we've kept doing it this long and that we've been able to put this much content together. Sharing something and just talking about something I'm so passionate about, man, trying to catch more fish and trying to help other people catch more fish. You know, that's why I became a guide in the first place. I really love doing it. I hope that comes through. I hope you guys can see that. Man, I just appreciate you guys so much for participating in this and all the feedback. Leave us a comment today. Let us know what you thought about the old jig fishing video. And we'll see you guys next time right here on Your Lake Fork Guide.